Hello, and welcome to the Los Pollos Hermanos family. My name is Gustavo, but you can call me Gus.
One of the most direct ways to engage an audience is by establishing a connection, whether that presents itself as hero worship, empathy, or a simple idea we can grasp onto. For some characters, that symbiotic relationship happens when a path is diverted. In the case of Gus Fring, the simple act of seeing how his life changed and the lengths he would stride afterward made for one of television's most terrifying villains with an extremely unique character-defining quirk.
A dog who bites every owner he's had can only be disciplined with a firm hand or put down.
Before we get too far, please be aware there are plenty of spoilers ahead. Debuting in Season 3 of Vince Gilligan's Breaking Bad, Gustavo Fring, played by Giancarlo Esposito, was initially introduced as a replacement antagonist for Walter White. While White had been locked into a conflict with the maniac, uber-violent, drug-addicted Tuco Salamanca, played by Raymond Cruz, the actor who played the Kingpin had to be written out due to prior commitments. Simply following in Tuco's path would have been redundant, akin to trying to recapture the magic of a trick to which we already knew the method.
Tight, yeah! Blue, yellow, pink. Whatever, man, just keep bringing me that.
So Gilligan crafted Fring to be antithetical to Tuco, a buttoned-down, calm, and collected businessman. In contrast to the more stereotypical cartel outlaw, here was a man who owned and operated a fast food franchise and seemed to be a pillar of the community. Initially, that introduction was only supposed to be a guest role totaling a couple of episodes. According to Esposito, who played Fring in both Breaking Bad and its prequel Better Call Saul, he was initially only asked to be in one episode. In an interview with Reuters, Esposito said, "I think if you ask Vince Gilligan, they didn't think I would go 4. That wasn't in their consciousness." In that same interview, Esposito said, "In the beginning, it wasn't defined. The guy was a nice guy. He appeared to be the manager of this chicken restaurant, but I always read into it that he was keeping a very big secret, even if he wasn't." Part of what makes Fring such a compelling villain is how he mirrors the protagonist. When we first meet Fring, he's running a chain of chicken restaurants called Los Pollos Hermanos as a front for his growing drug empire. Not entirely unlike a science teacher turned car wash mogul laundering their own drug money. Fring represents a dark reflection of what could become of White if he continues on the same path. When Fring learns of Walter and Jesse's skill with cooking and distributing narcotics, he wants them to work for him, to become employees he can manage. That keen eye for talent is also exactly what set Fring on his current path when we meet him. We learn that years before, Fring had met a man who would eventually become his professional and romantic partner, Max. Financing his education at university in chemistry, Fring was already thinking about his future, always dozens of steps ahead. That plan was changed when Max was killed by a rival drug cartel, specifically Hector Salamanca and Don Eladio, and there are lots of winding ins and outs to these families, even tying into previously written off Tuco. It feels odd to say that Fring was maybe on a good path prior to the death of Max. He was already running an illegal business and was rumored to have ties to larger cartels in Chile, but this one moment flipped a switch in Fring, one that set him down a track where, in addition to expanding his empire, he also wanted to ruin an entire family.
This culminates in one of the show's most memorable moments at a pool party for the family led by Don Eladio.
Arriving at the party with Mike and Jesse, we see Fring take a pill shortly before toasting alongside the party with a bottle of tequila he brought. There's a slight beat where the crowd waits to see Fring drink himself and then follow suit after he does. Then, after he excuses himself to the restroom, he has a small moment to himself. In the most calm and poised manner you can imagine, Fring sits on his knees in front of the toilet and gags himself. We watch him wash his hands, then gently dab the corners of his mouth with a neatly folded towel, and by the time he's finished, the man who had followed him into the bathroom has already died.
The same goes for most of the party by the pool, save Don Eladio,
who watches Fring exit the house, knowing this is the man's doing.
There's a look of recognition in Eladio's eyes,
where he knows the killer, where he recognizes the weight of every choice that brought him here, to floating face down in a pool. It's a satisfying moment, satisfying to us as the viewers anyway. There's nothing resembling joy in Fring's expression.
Just a cold stare from his eyes that demands Eladio just die already.
Then, his knees begin to give and he has to catch himself on a nearby table. It's here we're reminded of the determination an act like this truly takes. Despite the pill and the induced vomiting, we're reminded that he just ingested poison. Poison that is knocking down folk who have probably been ingesting narcotics in some form or fashion for decades. And here, Fring stands. He shouts off camera to the remaining guards,
Don Hilario está muerto!
still full of vigor and threatening death, all while still standing. The fact that Fring is always still standing follows all the way to his end when White finally arranges the man's death with an explosive strapped to Salamanca's wheelchair. Just as we had always seen him, Fring walks out of the room, calm and poised. He adjusts his tie briefly, and the camera pans to show the real duality of Fring. One of the more interesting aspects of him as a character isn't just the chess game he played with real human lives, it was how he chose to hide that game, the service industry.
Can I help you, sir? Diet Coke, please.
While he also used a laundromat in arguably still a customer-facing industry, he was much more active in his fast food restaurant. If you have ever worked in the service industry at all, be it franchise or not, you have worked with someone like Fring, at least the one he presents to the public. A man who donates to civic service, is a stickler for procedures, and is all about the most efficient way to please the public. This entire aspect of Fring's character is one of the most terrifying and poignant commentaries on the correlation between legal work for the public and illegal services that the public still partakes in. There's a sense of pride in the way he presents his restaurants, and he wants the same for his employees. He continues that same work ethos in his drug empire as well. He runs both as efficiently and professionally as possible. It is horribly accurate in a way not many other television shows touch upon, in either regard to the service industry or the illegal business. And between Breaking Bad and Better Call Saul, we were able to see more and more of Fring's world. Villains are, more often than not, more terrifying the less we know about them. It allows our imaginations to fill in the dark corners, usually reflecting something dark in us. But in Fring's case, the more we knew, the more compelling the character became. Part of that is due to Giancarlo Esposito's incredible performance. Esposito has since made a career portraying restrained terror. From his turn as Stan Edgar in The Boys to voicing Lex Luthor in Harley Quinn, he has crafted a poised monstrosity in the vein of Hannibal Lecter or Anton Chigurh.
The world will recognize you for the pitiful disappointment you are. You are not worthy of my respect.
That composure was evident throughout all of Breaking Bad, most famously in the colloquially known box cutter scene where Fring executes one of his own henchmen in order to intimidate White and Pinkman. While much has been said about this scene's ratcheting tension and shocking horror, we'd be remiss to not mention the display of power at hand. While that power was incredibly evident in Breaking Bad, there's a moment in Better Call Saul that might be his most powerful. It's not an order given, a throat cut, or a single threat made. It's a choice, one that cements Fring's life going forward. In a favorite wine bar, Fring engages in what is quite simply a lovely and endearing interaction with his favorite sommelier, David. It's a striking moment of normalcy. Both actors play with lingering glances and engaging conversation. When David gets up to grab a perfect bottle of wine for a special occasion, Fring makes a choice, one that takes him away from a happy relationship and a normal life running a restaurant with someone he loves. He chooses a path of darkness and destruction. The brilliance of this moment is that we, the audience, see Fring have a definitive chance at a happy ending, a life that does not require strife, violence, or ego. But Fring is so committed to the path he's on that even when there's a clean exit strategy, he refuses it and soldiers on. We see the true conviction behind the madness. We usually associate these types of criminal enterprises with a sense of impassioned impulsiveness, men with no choice but to go into illegal affairs, much like how Walter White was introduced to the drug trade. But this moment shows us that Gustavo Fring's choices were anything but last resort, and that might be the most terrifying thing of all.
A crippled little rata. What a reputation to leave behind.
This is Gustavo Fring.
Please don't hurt my baby, please.
When we leave, you're not gonna go running to those police officers out front?
This is Todd Alquist.
Oh! Damn, man, look at that, look!
And this is Tuco Salamanca. There really isn't a primary antagonist to Breaking Bad, but you could definitely argue some characters are presented as the villains of the series. And it really boils down to which characters are able to demonstrate the highest levels of humanity despite their inherent sociopathic tendencies. When we see psychopaths and sociopaths in film and television, we're often as fascinated by them as we are terrified. Vince Gilligan taps into this seemingly fear-driven intrigue we all share, digs deep into the human psyche surrounding these personality disorders, and then utilizes it to create some of the most tense scenarios ever to grace a television screen. He writes Tuco as this terrifyingly violent and unpredictable sociopath, Gustavo Fring as a calm and calculated psychopath, and Todd as about as close to a purely evil psychopath as you can get without turning him into a serial killer. They are all horrible, reprehensible, and outright terrifying, But some of these characters are worse than others, and it takes an understanding of how Vince Gilligan applies his knowledge of psychology to these characters to really tell the difference. Breaking Bad began airing in 2008, and unlike most television shows that slowly lose their audience as time goes on, Breaking Bad consistently gained an audience. This culminated in the show's final episode, which actually beat out the NFL in ratings for that night, as 10.3 million viewers tuned in to watch the fate of Walter White unfold on September 29, 2013. One of the reasons Breaking Bad was able to accumulate such a massive following was the relatability and realism with which Vince Gilligan was able to write these incredibly disparate and intricate characters. Every time he seeks to create an emotionally evocative moment, Gilligan delivers with pinpoint accuracy. As viewers, we feel the desperation and intensity of our main characters propped up right alongside the fear and chaos instilled by the show's seemingly antagonistic secondary characters. This is largely due to Vince Gilligan's ability to understand how human beings operate.
I don't think we're alike at all, Mr. White. You are not a cautious man at all. You have poor judgment.
We aren't going to attempt to deconstruct the entirety of antisocial personality disorder, or ASPD for short, but there are a few subtle differences between psychopaths and sociopaths that we are going to briefly touch on. Individually, psychopathy and sociopathy are not diagnosable conditions. However, both fit into the diagnostic criteria to meet ASPD. While it is true that all psychopaths are sociopaths, not all sociopaths demonstrate psychosis. Psychopathy is described in the Diagnostic and Statistical Manual of Mental Disorders as a lack of anxiety or fear and by a bold interpersonal style that may mask maladaptive behaviors. Whereas a sociopath is more impulsive and volatile. A true psychopath is someone that is not only an excellent manipulator, but is also able to disguise themselves as being completely normal. Sociopaths will behave with reckless abandon, as they do not really care about the consequences of their actions, whereas a psychopath is fully aware of everything going on around them at any given moment in time. We see these types of characters frequently in the Breaking Bad universe. The first of these big secondary characters we are introduced to is Tuco Salamanca, and it's quite the introduction.
Tight, yeah! Blue, yellow, pink! Whatever, man, just keep bringing me that.
In the 6th episode of Season 1 titled Crazy Handful of Nothing, Tuco spends the majority of his introduction beating Jesse Pinkman into a medically induced coma just to prove a point. This cements him in our minds as being an unpredictably dangerous sociopath. Tuco Salamanca is chaos dialed up to 11, and it's the first time Walt is introduced to the dangers of dealing with a cartel. With Tuco, Vince Gilligan utilizes not only sociopathy, but also a somewhat rare mental disorder called intermittent explosive disorder, which is defined as recurrent behavioral outbursts representing a failure to control aggressive impulses. Gilligan created a character that can turn from your friendly neighborhood methamphetamine wholesaler into a bloodthirsty nutcase at the drop of a dime, and is very reminiscent of Joe Pesci's early 90s mobster characters.
Heisenberg says, relax. Orale, Holmes. I'm relaxed.
He even goes as far as to insult a man who is dying from one of his beatings. All of this unpredictability and rage puts us as viewers on the edge of our seat whenever Tuco is on the screen. Tuco uses violence to gain his power, and through his character, we are effectively able to be introduced to the idea that our main character is entering a ruthless and brutal world where only the strong survive. Tuco was actually supposed to be a much larger part of Breaking Bad's 2nd season. He was offered an 8-episode arc, but after some discussion, Raymond Cruz requested that his character be killed off, mostly because he found the role extremely difficult to play and was coming home from 14-hour shoots not wanting to speak to anyone. This prompted Vince Gilligan to create a new antagonist for Walt and Jesse. Only this time, he'd swing the ASPD pendulum into the realm of true psychopathy. He would create a character who was terrifying through a veneer of cold, calm, and quiet calculation in Gustavo Fring.
I have invited you into my home so we could sit and talk, discuss what's going on in this business. Our business, like men.
Where Tuco intimidates us with violence, Gustavo Fring intimidates us with silence. One of the ways a person can achieve power in a situation is to always say less than necessary. And that's exactly how Gustavo Fring operates. We're afraid of him because we don't even understand who he is. In the Season 2 episode 11 titled Mandala, Gustavo Fring is originally seen as what appears to be an extra, just helping out his employees during a busy lunch shift. Once we finally get to this somewhat impromptu meeting between Gus Fring and Walter White, we see him for who he is, an incredibly intelligent, cautious, and informed drug dealer.
I have to ask, why?
There's a subtlety to his character in the sense that, at first, we only catch glimpses of his more sinister nature. He hides behind this plastic smile of a humble restaurant owner, but even in this first scene, we see him drop his facade for a few brief and terrifying seconds. For the most part, Gustavo Fring uses intimidation to maintain his power. Gus Fring terrifies us because of how far he thinks ahead. He orders the murder of Don Bolsa in his own home in an effort to consolidate power. He has an army of foot soldiers at his command who will do his every bidding. However, this isn't where Gustavo Fring is at his most terrifying. It's actually where he is the most comfortable. Where Gustavo Fring is the most terrifying is when he takes matters into his own hands. When he drops the facade and reveals this inner demon who has no loyalties to anyone outside of his own business. He murders his right-hand man in front of Walt and Jesse with a box cutter, just because he is angry. He tells Walt that he has no problem murdering his infant daughter. Even the moments where Gustavo Fring demonstrates kindness and reason are all done as either a manipulation or as a means to an end. Nothing matters to Gustavo Fring more than money and power. He is a one-man masterclass on the intelligence and intimidation necessary to maintain that power at all costs.
I will kill your wife. I will kill your son. I will kill your infant daughter.
Perhaps the most unsettling psychopath in the Breaking Bad universe lies within the character of Todd Alquist.
That dude? Whack job!
Let's just stick to the facts here.
Facts. Oh, okay. How about the fact that he shot a kid?
Todd is introduced to us as just this kind of seemingly polite pest control worker.
There's a nanny cam in the living room clock. I disabled it. I just thought you should know.
However, that facade is quickly dropped in the episode titled Dead Freight, in which Todd not only murders an innocent child without hesitation, he takes a trophy with him. He keeps the kid Spider. This is the same mentality hunters apply to wild game. Taking an innocent life is almost like a sport to him.
Shit happens, huh?
Todd Alquist isn't the most violent or calculated character on the show, but that is what makes him so terrifying. There's a pleasure that he derives from torturing and killing people that takes his character beyond being just a psychopath. Todd Alquist is pure evil. He seems to really enjoy the gradual psychological breakdown of Jesse Pinkman, offering him glimpses of hope, only to have those dreams dashed violently and dramatically. These moments were extrapolated upon in the film El Camino, where we really see Todd reveling in his torturous nature and just how much damage he did to Jesse Pinkman. Where Tuco Salamanca kills to intimidate and Gustavo Fring kills for power, Todd Alquist kills because he enjoys it. He doesn't have any lofty financial goals or aspirations to become head of a crime family. He just exists to kill, torture, and cause harm, which makes him the most inhuman character of these three.
Well, at the end of the day, it was him or us, and I chose us. And I would do it again.
He is a true narcissistic nihilist. He cares for nothing. He exists for nothing. He believes in nothing. This makes him almost completely impossible to track as a character. We can't predict any of his behaviors because we have no idea as to what actually drives him. He isn't the strongest. He isn't the smartest. He is chaos incarnate and reminds us that sometimes people don't have to have explanations for what they do. Sometimes people are just bad.
And then out of nowhere, Todd pulls out a gun and shoots the kid.
This is Todd Alquist we're talking about? He killed Drew Sharp?
Like it was nothing.
With Breaking Bad and the surrounding universe, Vince Gilligan draws us in time and time again, with characters that represent some of the more fringe elements of human psychology, and pitting them against the pursuit of money, power, and control. The absence of humanity presented within these characters reminds us what it means to be a person, and how important empathy and compassion are in our day-to-day lives. Without empathy, human interaction becomes cold, unnerving, and cutthroat. A good writer will dig deep into the psychology of their characters to bring them to life and utilize the unpredictable nature of the human mind to drive the desired tension they seek to create.
He needs an ambulance. He needs a hospital.
Do something! You're smart, right? Do that thing!
These characters all have us, as viewers, invested in their individual stories. Each one of Gilligan's characters could be viewed as an essay of not only various psychological conditions, but also how these conditions developed and shaped these characters over time. When we approach character mentalities with honor and respect for the psychology behind them, we create characters that instantly deliver the intended message with pinpoint accuracy. Vince Gilligan understands psychology. He understands the subtle differences between sociopathy and psychopathy. And he understands how to play with all the variables in between.
Whatever happened to Gary Cooper? The strong, silent type. See, what they didn't know was once they got Gary Cooper in touch with his feelings, that they wouldn't be able to shut him up.
Movements don't just pounce out of thin air. They percolate for years, often decades, before they rise to the surface, boil over, and spill over our collective popular culture. While it may take a long time to happen, they often vanish much more quickly. In the case of anti-heroes, what was once a cultural phenomenon and the subject of every forced water cooler conversation has almost vanished completely from our television screens.
Why am I on there?
What? It's not you.
The idea of an anti-hero is by no means a new storytelling device. Going as far back as myths like Robin Hood or epics like Thersites in Homer's Odyssey, the character trope is one who runs counterclockwise to our collective idea of a hero. They were often self-serving, cowardly, weak, with a morally gray code. They appeal to a side of us that romanticizes the idea of cunning or making it on our own despite the rules.
I got the shotgun. Got the briefcase. It's on the game though, right?
This mantra was embraced by the new Hollywood movement characters like Alex DeLarge from A Clockwork Orange or Travis Bickle in Taxi Driver. While movies have had more carte blanche to tell their stories due to the MPAA divvying up what was considered acceptable for adults and children, television traditionally had a thinner line to toe. The first couple shown in bed together wasn't until 1947, and the FCC strictly fined and regulated shows like NYPD Blue and Chicago Hope for airing nudity or swearing between the hours of 6 and 10, when they felt more children might be watching. But then we hit the golden era of prestige cable TV shows that began in 1999 with The Sopranos. The story revolved around Italian-American crime boss Tony Soprano trying to balance his empire and family life. The show caught on very quickly thanks to its powerful performances, inventive storytelling, and lead in James Gandolfini. Part of its unique framing was the fact that Gandolfini's Tony was in therapy. It made an otherwise distant figure and idea seem relatable. Despite Tony's cruelty and narcissism, he was a character who, at least on the surface, seemed to want to better himself.
Mr. Soprano?
Yeah.
That quirk made him instantly more relatable to audiences. He was a perfect introduction for millions to the idea of an anti-hero. Part of its appeal was obvious. Mobster and crime family stories have done incredibly well in the US market. From films like Godfather 1 and 2 all the way to Scarface, there's an inherent love and admiration for the ruthlessness and familial bonds of these types of stories. Appealing to an ingrained sense of wonder would continue with Deadwood in 2004. If there is one thing American audiences like more than the mobster genre, it may very well be the Western. Created by David Milch, co-creator of NYPD Blue, Deadwood focused on the titular South Dakota frontier town on the cusp of a gold rush. Nearly all the characters were what we would consider anti-heroes. Most notably, though, was Ian McShane's Al Swearingen. He ruled over the town with fear and intimidation.
Now, it's not for me to tell anyone in this camp what to do. Much as I don't want more people getting their throats cut.
But often for the town's own well-being. Over the next few years, Swearingen would become the gold standard to the question, do the ends justify the means? As consumers of stories, we adore that question. We are constantly weighing the pros and cons of given circumstances and asking how far would we go? At what cost will we draw a moral line? There has probably never been a television show that punched that question harder than 2008's Breaking Bad. Created by former X-Files showrunner Vince Gilligan, Breaking Bad told the story of Walter White, a meager high school chemistry teacher who turns to cooking and selling of illegal substances to make sure his family is not wrecked by medical debt after his lung cancer diagnosis.
But you know the business, and I know the chemistry. I'm thinking maybe you and I could partner up.
Before the show turned into the ascent of a criminal mastermind, it showed the audience how easily any one of us could turn to a life of crime. And not just out of greed, but out of a governmental service like medical care failing. Part of the genius of Breaking Bad, thanks in part to Bryan Cranston's spellbinding turn as Walter White, was just how understandable the decisions were. While it's less likely to relate to being in the mafia or running a saloon, it's incredibly simple to understand being ill. To understand not wanting our loved ones to be in debt after our passing. It's not a stretch to say that on a limited ticking clock of life, you wouldn't try anything to take care of your family. Once that hook is in, we fall in love with the character and happily get shocked or left in awe at every stretching stride that shows us this was probably never about White's family security as much as it was White being desperate to prove his life had value.
You clearly don't know who you're talking to, so let me clue you in. I am not in danger, Skyler. I am the danger.
And that quest for value is part of why anti-heroes grabbed audiences by the proverbial collar and shook us with more shows like Mad Men or Peaky Blinders. The shows became so enchanting and domineering, they formed their own era. The building of a movement that crescendoed until they all but disappeared. But how could something that was such a singular moment vanish? One easy answer is oversaturation. That answer is almost too simple though and doesn't really reflect the moment of ignition or where the entertainment landscape resides currently. In 1999, when The Sopranos debuted, it was a scrappy attempt at cable to be big and loud. Unlike your local stations that were free with a metal antenna strapped to your roof, cable cost money, and a premium channel like HBO was more money on top of that. The Sopranos had to be so good that you paid for channels when you already had free ones available. It was intentionally boisterous in order to do something the heavily regulated FFC would never allow on network. When Deadwood followed 5 years later, also on HBO, it went even further, especially in its foul language, which is said to have the F word 43 times in its opening episode. This seemed a deliberate strike from Milch, who was heavily fined before heading to the appeals court for showing a man's butt on primetime in his tenure on the aforementioned NYPD Blue.
I'll be sitting on this.
These shows were a novelty upon their release. An hour-long family drama about the mafia or profanity-laden western, and a good guy science teacher gone rogue that showed the ins and outs of drug production and distribution. While the internet was still in its adolescence, the research behind Breaking Bad showed methods that you used to only really be able to pick up from newspaper tidbits. These shows were pushing an envelope that had remained intact for decades. And now, there isn't really an envelope to push. With so many streaming options, organizations like the FCC are almost infantile. The only fines folks at Netflix and Hulu really have is lost subscriptions or dwindling views. Some of this shift away from the anti-hero is also simply a cultural shift. With the world bursting at the seams, people seem wanting more and more stories about do-gooders and traditional heroes, more often than not based on a comfort meal, that warm and familiar mashed potatoes intellectual property. With so many IPs like Godzilla, Marvel, and a never-ending Star Wars, that comfort is never too far away. And there's nothing wrong with being wrapped in warm familiarity, but there is something missing with shows that challenge us and demand answers to questions we're often too afraid to ask. Not to say those shows don't exist. Our Flag Means Death has incredibly interesting views on heroics and love. And Nathan Fielder and Benny Safdie's new show The Curse seems intent to make us question what being a good person really is. But the moment no longer has a stranglehold like the second golden era did on the cultural lexicon. Maybe it's because there are just so many new shows popping up so frequently. Many directors have lamented the idea of dumping so many films on streaming that they become content and not art. Too much of any one thing never pays off. Everyone loves mashed potatoes and gravy, but that should never be all you consume.
So what, no eating now? Hey!
You're a shitty lawyer, Howard. But you're a great salesman. So get out there and sell.
You, Jimmy.
There you go.
Better Call Saul is a near-perfect example of how to approach a prequel series to a show that is widely hailed as one of the best television dramas of all time. Somehow, Better Call Saul's showrunners are able to capture the tonal and thematic elements that make Breaking Bad so great, and repackage them in a way that feels fresh and new. Funny enough, the title of Better Call Saul's perfect episode is the same tool that the writers use to differentiate the series from Breaking Bad in such a captivating way. The 5th episode of the show's 3rd season is titled Chicanery.
Better Call Saul entered development back in 2013 when AMC approached Vince Gilligan and Peter Gould to create a spin-off of Breaking Bad. Better Call Saul was initially conceived as a series of short vignettes in which Saul Goodman would be working on cases featuring various celebrity cameos. Writing for this format was a struggle, and they quickly pivoted toward writing for an hour-long format with a focus on incorporating comedic elements into a crime drama. The show centers around Jimmy McGill, who would eventually become Walter White's shady attorney, Saul Goodman, and follows his transformation from a two-bit con man with good intentions into the flashy, fast-talking cartel lawyer who cuts so many corners that he eventually whittles away at his sense of self until he is almost unrecognizable. The episode we are here to talk about, Chicanery, serves as the exact halfway point of the entire series, and is arguably one of, if not the single most important episode for our main character, Jimmy McGill. The entire episode plays out as a procedural courtroom drama in which Jimmy acquires the help of Kim Wexler to defend him during a hearing for his disbarment. Jimmy tampered with evidence that was in possession of his brother in an effort to help Kim secure a new client. Evidence tampering is a felony, and a complete confession to his crime is there to prove Jimmy's guilt. The courts and the presenting attorneys have everything they need to disbar Jimmy McGill, yet we know for a fact that he doesn't get disbarred.
Clearly his taste in women is the same as his taste in lawyers, only the very best, with just the right amount of dirty.
A lot of the fun in watching Better Call Saul comes from our knowledge of where the characters end up. However, because we know that certain characters are safe and certain characters are not, the show has to rely on relationships and emotions to drive the tension of the story, which results in a much richer and deeper story overall. And while we understand that certain characters might be physically safe, the show repeatedly puts their psychologies, perspectives, and philosophies in mortal danger. While no character is actually killed off during Chicanery, the episode does feature a couple of major deaths in the spiritual and philosophical sense.
Rebecca!
No, that's what the hell?
The opening of Chicanery finds Jimmy McGill showing up to, once again, take care of his brother Chuck. Jimmy has been caring for Chuck for the entirety of the series, helping him through a disorder known as electromagnetic hypersensitivity. This condition exists in the real world, and while there is some debate of the legitimacy of this disorder, it is largely believed to be a psychiatric condition exacerbated by acute paranoia. This flashback sequence at the top of the episode really does a great job of establishing a few things that are absolutely necessary to the emotional weight of this episode. The first being that Jimmy cares deeply about Chuck and his well-being. He cares to the point where he helps Chuck plan this elaborate ruse to conceal his mental disorder from his estranged wife, Rebecca, with whom he is attempting to reconcile. The second thing it establishes is that Chuck is willing to go along with one of Jimmy's elaborate ruses only when it is to benefit himself. Where Jimmy is willing to lie and manipulate the people he cares about in sort of a backwards way to help others, Chuck is willing to lie and manipulate the people he cares about to save face as a benefit to himself. This also serves as a tool to exemplify Chuck's insane level of pride and inherent need to appear to be in control at any cost. He'd rather let Rebecca leave thinking that he assaulted her than admit to struggling with something beyond his control. This is all a great example of how important these two incredibly flawed brothers are to one another. Despite their struggles, they still respect each other to some degree. The disbarment hearing, in which the bulk of this episode takes place, is a seemingly personal endeavor for Chuck's legal partner, Howard Hamlin, and most importantly for Chuck McGill himself. Chuck has been pulling the strings of Jimmy's legal career for years, and has largely used Howard Hamlin as a pawn to execute his desires to tear his brother down at every turn. During the scene in which Howard and Chuck are strategizing about how the proceedings should play out, Howard makes a plea for Chuck to let him handle it and take a back seat.
Maybe there's no need to put you through the ringer like this.
This isn't about me or my health. This is about PR.
However, Chuck is a control freak who is currently obsessed with delivering a killing blow to a legal career he has tried to extinguish for years. Chuck wants to beat Jimmy at his own game once and for all. The remainder of this episode plays out like two brothers placing their hands on the top of a baseball bat. The upper hand seems to consistently waver back and forth between Jimmy and Chuck during these tense, emotional legal proceedings. We've seen Chuck in Howard's hand, and we know how they intend to play it. On the other side of the coin, we see Jimmy's hand play out just one card at a time. In the stairwell, we are treated to a cameo from the Breaking Bad timeline with the introduction of Saul Goodman's faithful security guard, Huel Babineau. We see Huel bump into Chuck in the stairwell. We know that something happened here, but we're unclear as to what. Did Huel steal something from Chuck, or did he plant something on him? We're slowly being led somewhere, and it's coming into focus one tiny piece at a time. We also see Jimmy conferring with his secretary over the arrival of someone important and delaying the trial. It's these little moments that reel us into the plot of the episode, but it's the emotional stakes that keep us living in the moment. Chuck is trying to kill his brother.
I love my brother. But Ted Kaczynski's brother loved him too.
Not in a physical sense, but he is trying to destroy the person who Jimmy McGill has become, and he's willing to do anything in his power to get there. The crux of his entire assassination attempt rests on a recording he made of Jimmy confessing to felony evidence tampering. After the opposing counsel plays the tape of Jimmy's confession for the courtroom, it really seems like this recording is the bullet that kills Jimmy McGill's legal career. This is also the first time that Kim Wexler gets to peek under the hood as to exactly how she came to become Mesa Verde's lead attorney. Through Kim Wexler's reaction to the tape, actress Ray Seahorn is able to capture an emotional state laden with surprise and concern, but there's also an endearment to her reaction as well. Throughout the entirety of Better Call Saul, Kim Wexler has been a character who can see past Jimmy's actions in favor of his intent. When Chuck finally takes the stand, we see all of that work and hatred begin to play itself out. He delivers an incredibly convincing speech that seems to be received exactly in the way it was intended.
That's why I did what I did. Not to hurt him, but to protect something that I hold sacred.
However, the eyes of Michael McKean's portrayal of Chuck McGill tell a more intricate and painful story. Under the surface, we see Chuck desperately trying to conceal his emotions and remain cold and indifferent to the proceedings at hand. The deck seems to be stacked against Jimmy McGill, but the emotional stakes at play underneath it all definitely present an interesting flaw in the prosecution's ironclad case. Before Jimmy cross-examines Chuck, his estranged wife, Rebecca, shows up. This was the arrival that Jimmy had been waiting for, but why is Rebecca there? We can presume that it is to throw Chuck off his game during cross-examination, but it's really much deeper than that. Jimmy has disclosed Chuck's electromagnetic hypersensitivity to Rebecca.
What exactly did he say?
Well, that you had been sick, allergic to electricity. He sent me pictures of the house. Chuck, my God.
The concealment of this disorder was previously established as something Jimmy would protect his brother from, but this pivot toward disclosure is really the writer's way of showing us that Jimmy has let go of his obligations to his brother. As finished as Chuck McGill is with Jimmy, Jimmy is equally as finished with Chuck. Despite the curveball thrown with the introduction of Rebecca into this episode, Chuck still seems to be wildly unflappable during this cross-examination, and he doesn't even flinch at Jimmy's ruse with the cell phone.
May I?
And this moment is where Jimmy knows he has Chuck right where he wants him. There's a pause before Jimmy goes in for the kill. He knows what he's about to do and considers it carefully before following through.
Could you reach into your breast pocket and tell me what's there?
He reveals that Chuck has had a fully charged battery in his jacket pocket for almost 2 hours, thus outing Chuck for being mentally ill. This sends Chuck into an extremely emotional tirade in which he drops his carefully rehearsed facade and essentially confesses his true motives to the panel. A heavy, weighted silence falls over the courtroom. It's at this moment we understand that the tables have turned. It's now Jimmy who has killed his own brother, and everyone inside this courtroom just watched it happen. Jimmy hangs his head with guilt because he knows that he has just destroyed Chuck. In a way, this is also the moment where Jimmy McGill dies, and the real Saul Goodman is born.
Hi, I'm Saul Goodman. Did you know that you have rights? The Constitution says you do, and so do I.
Chuck was the only family Jimmy had in the world, and Jimmy cared for him for years. All of that is gone now. This slow zoom shows the life leaving Charles McGill's eyes, and he looks like a corpse as he stares into the warm, red glow of the exit sign. Chicanery is a perfect episode of Better Call Saul, not because it has the most shocking twists and turns or the largest connections to the Breaking Bad universe. It's a perfect episode because it truly captures what separates Better Call Saul from Breaking Bad. Chicanery is the point of no return for Jimmy McGill, as he abandons his conscience and familial obligations and essentially assassinates his brother's character in front of his peers and loved ones.
It's an emotionally charged expose of a strained relationship between two brothers that results in almost nobody winning, reminding us that even when the world of Breaking Bad and Better Call Saul strays from the world of cartels and drug trafficking, there are still no real winners.
Chemistry is the study of matter, but I prefer to see it as the study of change.
Breaking Bad was about change. More specifically, it was about a talented but unassuming man who changes into the last thing you'd ever expect him to become. So it's kind of ironic that Bryan Cranston got to play the main character in the series. Because not too long before Walter White came along, Cranston himself had undergone a similar metamorphosis, changing from a talented but relatively unknown character actor into the last thing anyone ever expected him to become, a star. Bryan Cranston was born in Hollywood, California, and both his parents were actors. But despite allowing their son to be in some local and regional theater productions as a kid, Cranston's parents actually discouraged him from going into show business. Instead, he decided to pursue a degree in police science at Los Angeles Valley College in 1976. As fate would have it, though, he had to take an acting class to fulfill an elective requirement. The experience immediately changed his life, and at 19 years old, he decided to become an actor. He toiled at an assortment of day jobs while breaking in, but by 1980, Cranston was getting work on television, appearing in commercials, and in minor roles on popular shows like Days of Our Lives and Chips. He got his first role on a series as a cast member of the daytime soap Loving in 1983, a part he'd play until 1985, and he was also a regular on the short-lived 1988 sitcom Raising Miranda. But despite the early promise, it would be a really long time until he was a regular on a TV show again. Though Cranston didn't disappear from television either. Far from it. Instead, he quietly became one of those reliable character actors who shows up in one episode of pretty much everything. His early resume, for example, includes one-off roles on iconic 1980s shows like Airwolf, Hill Street Blues, Baywatch, Murder, She Wrote, and Matlock. And in the 1990s, he showed up in series like Walker, Texas Ranger, Babylon 5, Sabrina the Teenage Witch, Seinfeld, and most significantly, The X-Files.
Crump, what else can you tell me about what's happening to you?
Mr. Crump. Call me by my last name, you say Mr. in front of it.
But we'll get back to that one. Along the way, he also racked up appearances in movies like Amazon Women on the Moon, That Thing You Do, and Saving Private Ryan. But at the age of 44, after 20 years in the business, Cranston's most well-known part was playing Dr. Tim Whatley on 5 episodes of Seinfeld. It seemed like his fate was to be a working character actor.
Where's Jennifer today? Oh, she's over at Dr. Sussman's office. Yeah, we find it fun to swap now and then.
But everything would change again for Bryan Cranston in the year 2000, when he was invited to audition for Hal Wilkerson, a leading role on Malcolm in the Middle. The new Fox sitcom was about a boy genius growing up under the thumb of a domineering mother.
Let me tell you something. That is just wishful thinking. There's meningitis, there are car accidents. I could be giving you a spanking and accidentally snap your spinal cord.
While the boy's more laid-back father was a smaller part. Cranston's instincts for doing a lot with a little, honed over those decades of character acting, kicked in, and he quickly developed a unique take on the character that molded him into the polar opposite of Malcolm's mother.
That is a rectal thermometer.
I'm gonna go brush my teeth.
According to Cranston, he figured she's not afraid of anything, so Hal should be completely fearful. She's insightful, so Hal is obtuse. The clever and nuanced take created a delightful push and pull between the two characters that not only won Cranston the part, but also convinced producers to expand Hal's role on the series. Critically acclaimed and one of the better performing shows on its network, Malcolm in the Middle would run for 151 episodes over 7 seasons. Cranston's clownishly over-the-top performance as Hal earned him 3 Emmy nominations and quickly established him as one of the most gifted comic actors on television. Once that show was done, parlaying his success into a starring role in another sitcom would have been a safe, easy, and lucrative route for Cranston to take, but he wasn't really interested in any of those things. According to the actor, I wanted a change of pace, and whether that meant a comedy or drama, it was going to be different because I didn't need the money anymore. That being the case, things were about to break in an unexpected direction. Remember when we mentioned his appearance on The X-Files in 1998? Well, that episode required Cranston to play a loathsome and villainous man who also had a deep, resounding humanity that made him sympathetic to the audience when he died. And it was written by a screenwriter named Vince Gilligan. Anyway, right around the time Malcolm in the Middle was wrapping up, Gilligan was producing a pilot for AMC called Breaking Bad. His top 2 choices for the lead role of Walter White were Matthew Broderick and John Cusack. but both turned him down. Recalling Cranston's performance as the thematically similar character from The X-Files, the actor became Gilligan's next choice. Network executives, however, were skeptical of casting the famously goofy Hal in their edgy new drama, and Gilligan himself admitted that had he only known Cranston from Malcolm in the Middle, he probably wouldn't have called him for Breaking Bad. But after Gilligan showed them Drive, the execs relented and Cranston got the part. Gilligan had originally envisioned Walter White as
Mr. Chips turns into Scarface,
but Cranston instead chose to play him as a man in the midst of a midlife crisis, changing himself from something ordinary to something extraordinary.
Heisenberg. You're goddamn right.
Cranston's choices helped fill the character out and greatly influenced how he would be written going forward. Cranston was also instrumental in designing Walter's look, including coming up with the iconic mustache and even channeling his own father to find Walter's posture and mannerisms. Breaking Bad would go on to become one of the most acclaimed shows in television history. Walter White would become one of the most iconic fictional characters of all time, and Cranston's performance would win him 6 Emmys, 2 Golden Globes, and 3 Screen Actors Guild Awards. If Malcolm in the Middle had changed Bryan Cranston into a star, Breaking Bad had made him into a legend.
I am not in danger, Skyler. I am the danger. A guy opens his door and gets shot, and you think that of me? No. I am the one who knocks.
Given his massive fame and reputation as an actor, Cranston probably could have done just about anything he wanted after Breaking Bad. And given how much success it brought him, certainly few would have been surprised if he followed up by playing similarly edgy and violent characters on television or in the movies. But instead, the actor decided to change things up again and take on the Great White Way. Coming right off his run as Walter White in September of 2013, Cranston switched to playing President Lyndon B. Johnson in the theatrical production of All the Way, first at American Repertory Theater in Massachusetts, and then on Broadway. The show was met with universal acclaim, and Cranston's performance won him the Tony Award for Best Actor in a Play, an award he would win again in 2017 for his performance as Howard Beale in the Broadway adaptation of the 1976 film Network. At the same time, he continued to work in films, appearing in 2014's Gareth Edwards-directed Godzilla reboot, 2015's critically acclaimed Trumbo, for which he was nominated for an Academy Award, and more recently, Wes Anderson's 2023 comedy Asteroid City. He's also routinely lent his voice to films like 2016's Kung Fu Panda 3 and 2017's Power Rangers. The actor also branched out into the business world. He became a co-owner of the cinema's Palm d'Or Independent Theater in Palm Desert until its closure in 2016, and in 2019, he co-founded the Dos Hombres brand of mezcal with his former Breaking Bad co-star Aaron Paul. And of course, Cranston also kept appearing on television, making guest appearances in shows like Curb Your Enthusiasm and Family Guy.
We now return to Bryan Cranston Sneezes.
Thank you.
And even briefly reprising his role as Walter White in El Camino and Better Call Saul. And in 2020, he returned to TV full-time by playing the title role in the dark, dramatic series Your Honor. The show was met with mixed reviews, but was successful enough to earn a second season, despite originally being conceived as a one-season miniseries. But the point is, Bryan Cranston could have easily continued to milk his success as Hal and be a sitcom star, or played crime bosses for the rest of his career after Breaking Bad. But instead, he's still finding success in wildly different roles across a host of different genres and mediums. And he did it by being open to change. In fact, he's so open to change, in 2023 he announced he was going to change the paradigm once again by hitting the pause button on acting so he could support his wife's career. So if you followed all that, he changed from a police science student to a character actor, to a comedy star, to a dramatic icon, into a businessman, and from a businessman into a thoughtful and supportive husband. The man's whole life and career path has really just been one big study in the power of change, a grand chemistry lesson from the great Heisenberg himself.
Please, I don't want my daughter seeing me like that.
Your daughter won't see you.
Yes, she will. She never once sleeps through the night.
Nobody's gonna find you, Lydia.
Happenstance is a wild phenomenon, a perfect alignment of events, ideas, and circumstances that land in one pivotal moment. In the case of Breaking Bad, chaos reared its ugly head when Bob Odenkirk's wildly popular Saul Goodman wasn't available due to the actor's commitment on How I Met Your Mother. This narrative rock in a hard place ended in the creation of a character that would forever alter Breaking Bad's future and how we think of hired muscle.
What the... Son of a...
As the second season of Breaking Bad was drawing to a close, the writers found themselves facing a problem. While they needed to bring the season's overarching plot to a satisfying conclusion, one of their key players was going to be unavailable. This put the show in a bind. They had been building towards Goodman being the linchpin of the season's third act. Goodman had originally been intended to be a means of wrapping up Walter White and Jesse Pinkman's fractured relationship.
Who do I look like, Maury Povich? I'm not your marriage counselor.
As symbolized in the newly added love interest Jane Margolis, played by Kristen Ritter. Unable to work around the scheduling problem, series creator Vince Gilligan and the writers decided to create a new character to bring the season to a close. Introduced in the season finale, ABQ, we meet Saul's cleaner, Mike Ehrmantraut, played by Jonathan Banks. The trope of a cleaner is, in and of itself, not a new idea to the world of crime fiction. Often used to explain away DNA, deceased bodies, and other incriminating evidence, they're usually presented as cold and methodical. And that trope makes sense in the workmanlike nature of their business. While a dealer, hitman, or burglar performing a heist is often romantic, there's a monotony to the character that is just cleaning up the mess. But when done correctly, that character can be very compelling. And that is exactly what we got in Mike. When Jesse Pinkman wakes up to find his partner Jane deceased from asphyxiating on her own vomit, unknowingly due to Walter White not attempting to save her the night before as a means to regain control of his partner, Saul Goodman is called. In his stead, Mike is sent to help clean up the scene in order to keep the two out of trouble. As Mike helps clean up the scene, he coaches Jesse on what to say to the police.
Here's your story. You woke up, you found her, that's all you know.
These three small fragmented sentences are a window into Mike himself. The barest amount of information, a lie wrapped in truth, and most importantly, an acceptance of the life you have now put yourself into. Season 2 was when Breaking Bad really started to show the consequences of White's arc. Instead of the direct conflicts and situations unto himself, we started to see how his actions rippled throughout the world. His family, his relationships, and his own psyche. Mike became a representation of the long-term effects of these ripples. The character was no longer a singular puddle, as much as he was a river. The coldness and meticulousness of Mike is the result of decisions made earlier in his life. We'll learn later that Mike, at one point, was a crooked police officer in Philadelphia. When his son Matty also became a cop, he was presented with the same offer as his father: take some bribes, turn a blind eye, and survive. Only when Matty takes too long to decide, partly due to seeking Mike's advice, he is killed by the officers. This moment, and then Mike ambushing and killing his son's murderers, are the beginning of what would establish Mike's understanding of how criminals work and the steps you must take when working with or around them. While White quickly operated like the colloquial bull in a china shop, our cleaner knew survival took more finesse. After being forced to work with Gus, White immediately wants to murder the rising kingpin in an attempt to protect himself. When he brings this up to Mike, the man only has one answer: a punch to the face. In this moment, we realize that Mike has an understanding of patience and place. He knows that killing Gus would not only be a betrayal of his loyalty, another aspect of the character reinforced episode after episode, but also just a flat-out bad idea. While Gus is a man on a mission of vengeance, leaving death in his wake, he is also a planner with fail-safes and contingency plan after contingency plan. White is just a guy in over his head, flying by the seat of his pants. He is reaction upon reaction to the moments that happened to him and because of him. Mike, however, has formed a relationship with Gus because the two understand the importance of thinking ahead to ensure any necessary reactions have been considered. And Mike's not wrong here. When White does kill Gus, it leaves a void that threatens to swallow the high school chemistry teacher turned cook turned criminal, desperately trying to just maintain until he's forced to go on the run. Throughout Breaking Bad and its prequel Better Call Saul, we see that Mike isn't the stereotypical greedy criminal character, even in a show full of greedy characters. From White's ever-growing want for respect and power, Gus's personal vendetta, or even Jesse's want for approval, Mike always presented himself as more of a head-down, nose-to-the-grindstone criminal. That subversion of expectations is not new territory for Gilligan. The creator, writer, and director initially cut his teeth on The X-Files in the late 90s. The show told the story of two FBI agents who investigate paranormal cases, one a skeptic and the other a believer. But the stories there were never the typical silhouetted agents in black suits and unmarked cars. The episodes were often optimistic and nihilistic in the same breath. They managed to toe the line between conspiracy theories and faith. More often than not, they were also extremely playful. In the 12th episode of season 5, Gilligan, in his 5th writing credit, would pen an episode titled Bad Blood, a story about vampire attacks recapped by wildly different perspectives on the same events by agents Mulder and Scully. It's a sort of pitch-perfect way to let us inside a character's head as we see their indifferent interpretation of identical moments. In Breaking Bad and Better Call Saul, we see this same storytelling but as how characters deal with moments. Going back to Mike's introduction with Jesse and Jane, we understand so much about the character by the way he interacts with the death in contrast to Jesse. While Jesse has a much more relatable freak-out, terrified and feeling guilty due to both of them engaging in the same illegal activity, this all seems like secondhand to Mike. Another body and another mess to clean up. Mike never wants any more details than what he needs to know in order to finish the task at hand, because knowing any more draws him deeper into a whirlpool he has no interest in wading. That may seem like a cold reaction, and in lesser hands it might appear so. Luckily though, the actor playing Mike was Jonathan Banks. While obtaining his big break in the 80s crime drama Wise Guy, Banks had already been acting in smaller roles throughout the 70s and early 80s. A lot of those roles were in comedic films like Stir Crazy, Gremlins, and even The Adventures of Buckaroo Banzai Across the Eighth Dimension. That pedigree of strange directors like W.D. Richter, classic dramatists like Sidney Poitier, and legendary funny men Richard Pryor and Gene Wilder meant that Banks had an enormous palette of influences to draw from. It's easy to look at a character like Mike and remember the quote-unquote badass moments, his stony glare, or gruff responses.
We were just supposed to scare you, that's all.
You try harder next time.
But all of that would be for naught if it weren't for moments of heart and sincerity. Throughout Breaking Bad and Better Call Saul, we see very paternal moments with Mike. When Gus wants to drive a wedge between White and Jesse, he sends the younger cook out with Mike on cartel jobs, where they begin to bond with each getting something in return. Jesse, the respect he wants, and Mike, the son he misses. In Better Call Saul, Mike forms a strong bond with Nacho Varga. When it's revealed that Nacho's life of crime revolves around supporting his father, Mike is bound and determined to continue taking care of the father after Nacho's death. It's a level of commitment to support and protect the families that Mike demonstrated throughout both series. There's an ingrained sense of loyalty beneath the cold cleaner that shows his heart and dedication. A love that, despite the dirty waters in which he swims in, is clear as day. While many of the characters of Gilligan's Southwest Syndicate waver and flow, Mike never does. That's an attribute that has endeared him to fans for years. He's one of a handful of characters that appeared in Breaking Bad, Better Call Saul, and El Camino. He's remembered as not just an amazing character, but one who genuinely increased our love of the show. That kind of legacy stems from simple happenstance and a core idea of practicality. Mike's a man who believes you shouldn't be here, but since you are, you must do everything possible to stay alive. Mike was never going to have an arc in the same way as Jesse or Walter. Jesse's story was almost a coming of age, a boy looking for respect who wavered between what kind of man he could be. Walter was always going to be a criminal, a harbinger of absolute power, corrupting absolutely. But by the time we meet Mike, his arc is complete. He's learned his lessons through mistakes and ripples that have reverberated throughout his entire life. And we're lucky enough to have watched him share those lessons over hours of television, even if they often fell on deaf ears.
We're talking about a career setback for one lawyer.
This is Kim Wexler, arguably the most complex character in Better Call Saul and inarguably one of the greatest television characters to ever exist. Ray Seahorn plays the role with a level of perfection audiences haven't seen since Bryan Cranston's Walter White in Breaking Bad. Kim's intensely tragic character development and ultimate downfall were fairly inevitable. But that doesn't make her story of growth, loss, and metamorphosis into Slip and Kimmy any less worthy of discussion.
I'm at the bar at Fork, and I've got a live one on the hook.
I'm on my way.
Writer and co-creator Vince Gilligan has openly stated that when writing Better Call Saul, they saw the character of Kim Wexler as an unimportant love interest that would ultimately fall by the wayside to make room for Jimmy McGill's development. Similarly to Aaron Paul's Jesse Pinkman in Breaking Bad, Kim's rise to prominence in the show is thanks to the talent of the actress, which the writers quickly realized could not be wasted. But while this beefed-up part allowed Ray Seahorn to soar to new heights of esteem and popularity, the character she played would sink deeper and deeper into despair. Now, more often than not, Kim's interest in Jimmy and desire to help him leads her astray.
Jesus, what? Kim, what?
Across the span of the series, she nudges Jimmy into the direction of practicing elder law and recommends him for a job at a prestigious law firm at the expense of her own reputation. She berates him for falsifying evidence, but she helps construct a case against Jimmy's own brother Chuck when Jimmy's career is on the line. And she also advises him on how to be reinstated after he was suspended from practicing law. But what started as a mostly innocent presence swiftly takes on a life of its own. She gets sucked deeper into Jimmy's world. She's forced to stand up to a crime lord, sabotages the career of a former boss, Howard Hamlin, ruins her chances at the opportunity of a lifetime, and at one point was even willing to resort to murder. She does all this because of her commitment to Jimmy. Or at least that's how it starts, because she eventually succumbs to the con artist lifestyle and she actually thrives on it.
I don't want it. All that effort. You're just gonna toss it away?
As early as the season 2 premiere, audiences were given hints that Kim wouldn't be a purely positive force in Jimmy's life. The second kiss the pair ever shares on screen is during this episode, directly after the two of them con a stockbroker into buying them an expensive bottle of tequila. In the moment, this is framed as Jimmy sort of showing the honest and virtuous Kim the ropes of a basic scheme, and she finds it thrilling enough to go home with him that night. It's a moment of corruption of Kim's character that would steadily grow and mutate in the seasons to come, and at the time, it seemed pretty cut and dry that Jimmy was purely to blame for bringing a good-hearted person down to his level. We later learned that things are a little more complicated than that. Kim is surprisingly comfortable in the role of a scammer, schemer, and con artist. In Season 5, Episode 10, when Jimmy raises concerns that Kim might not be okay with ruining Howard's career in the cold light of day, Kim gives us one of her most iconic lines. Just 2 simple words.
Wouldn't I?
The way Ray Seahorn delivers this line feels almost like she's daring Jimmy to underestimate her abilities. Like she has a secret she has yet to tell him about who she really is under that good-natured exterior. And to his credit, Bob Odenkirk plays off of Seahorn perfectly in this scene. Looking at the truth of this woman, he thought he understood with new curiosity and all. The end of Season 5 and beginning of Season 6 also gives the audience glimpses into Kim's childhood, which we knew very little about beforehand. These flashbacks provide more incredibly important information on her background that inform her character moving forward. Particularly, the audience gets to see Kim's negligent mother. Not only does her mother think it's appropriate to pick her daughter up in a car after a night of heavy drinking, but also has no qualms about using her daughter to steal jewelry from a local mall.
Hey, relax. You got away with it.
Considering all this, Kim's actions throughout the whole of Better Call Saul are completely recontextualized. Having never gotten the sort of infallible and unconditional love she needed, Kim embodies those principles herself as an adult. And Jimmy, who spent most of his young life eagerly seeking the approval of first his parents and then his disapproving brother, is the perfect recipient for such impulses. Of course, perfect is sort of a loose descriptor here because, as fans of the show know, apart, they're okay, but
together, we're poison.
It only makes sense for Kim to find and latch onto someone like Jimmy in adulthood. In a way, he's very much a stand-in for Kim's mother. Jimmy always getting himself into trouble and expecting Kim to react in a way he feels is appropriate is not dissimilar to the way Kim is treated by her mother in the flashbacks. And of course, his scamming is no different than her mother stealing the necklace at the mall. And for Jimmy, who searches for approval and affection outside the cold mistreatment of his family, Kim is exactly the kind of person he thinks he needs. But all this really means is that their relationship is built on an unhealthy codependency wherein they do nothing but bring out the worst in each other. And that really is what happens. While Jimmy provides Kim with an entrance into a world of crime, she dives into that life willingly, sometimes pulling Jimmy further in alongside her. It's almost insulting to Kim's character to assume that it was entirely Jimmy's influence that made her do everything she does over the course of the show. Diluting this strong-willed, self-assured character down to a damsel being manipulated into action by a bumbling con man was perhaps the greatest scam of all, and it was pulled over on us, the audience, for multiple seasons. But if there was ever any doubt, those 2 words from Kim in Season 5 are all the confirmation we needed to confirm that Kim is perfectly capable of making morally corrupt decisions all on her own. Jimmy was just the spark that lit the fire to allow Slip and Kimmy to boil to the surface.
I have had the time of my life with you, but we are bad for everyone around us. Other people suffer because of us.
But she was never all bad. Kim's passion for pro bono work shone through for a great deal of the show. The joy she felt from being offered a meeting with an up-and-coming foundation that supported pro bono lawyers was certainly genuine. And she does often sacrifice her own happiness and career for that of Jimmy, because she does actually believe in him and wants him to succeed. So seeing her give up her dreams for the sake of a con and become a would-be murderer to keep Jimmy safe is heartbreaking on a whole new level. And she does, in the end, recognize all of this. Even if it's a little too late, she breaks up with Jimmy and leaves New Mexico, quitting the bar and resolving to put the past behind her in Florida. Although she's away from the negative influences in her life, she has actually overcorrected and stopped making decisions for herself, even mundane ones. She voluntarily stripped herself of her personality because she's afraid she'll hurt someone again. For someone who once proclaimed she wanted more out of life than what her tiny hometown could give her, this is perhaps a worse fate than the jail time she may have faced back in Albuquerque. Still, she's willing to live out the rest of her days like that if it means keeping other people safe. But when she gets a call alerting her to the fact that Jimmy has been arrested in Nebraska and is being extradited to New Mexico, Kim finds herself on her way back to Albuquerque to watch Jimmy's trial hearing. He takes the blame for absolutely everything while Kim watches on in silence, sitting statuesquely at the back of the courtroom. As an audience, we half expect her to jump up and come to Jimmy's defense, but this is a new version of Kim Wexler.
Kim had the guts to start over. She left town, but I'm the one who ran away.
The final scene of the show sees Kim absolved of her crimes, while Jimmy faces 86 years behind bars. In order to get herself into the prison, Kim uses her technically not expired bar card in one last bend of the rules, for the sake of her and Jimmy. The two share a cigarette together the way we've seen them do before, and Jimmy gives Kim his signature finger guns. But Kim doesn't replicate the gesture the way she had done in the past after planning Howard's downfall. As an audience, we can see this as an indication that Kim at least is still committed to rebuilding her life in a positive way, even if that means it's unbearably dull. Much like Walter White, Kim Wexler's moral degradation was sharp, spiraling, and came at the cost of herself and those around her. But there's a tragedy to her character as well. She struggled against her desire to do good and the thrill of the con, and because of that, her fall was inevitable.